Come to order, and the clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Here.
Vice Chair Busey,
Here.
Rep. Burrows, Rep. Capriglione,
Here.
Rep. Deala, Rep. Manuel,
Here.
Rep. Morales,
Here.
Rep. Swanson,
Here.
Rep. Vo.
A quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone present wishing to testify before the committee, please register at the kiosk located in the hallways behind the hearing rooms. If you require assistance in registering or testifying, please contact the committee staff. Due to the number of witnesses, and we don't have a huge number, but due to the number of witnesses who registered and to accommodate all who wish to testify, there will be a time limit of 3 minutes per witness during the public testimony period. Committee members, as a reminder, please remember to check out the publicly available comments. These comments are left by the public on each agenda item in our hearings, and the comments are open until the end of the hearing and are posted upon adjournment from our hearing. We will now lay out House Bill 3159 and recognize Representative Leach to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, good afternoon to each of you. Appreciate you allowing me the opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to lay out. I believe there's a committee sub, by the way.
You need to say.
Okay. Representative Swanson offers a committee substitute. Members, are there any questions for Representative Leach? Or you go ahead and lay it out.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure the committee sub was in front of us. Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair Busey, thank you. And thank you to Representative Swanson for laying out the committee substitute to House Bill 3159. I'm now in my sixth term, members, and I think, if my memory serves me correctly, that this is my first time to ever be in front of the Elections Committee, and so I'm really grateful to be here. And this bill, I think, is very important. It's a bill I care a lot about. I think it's an important policy change that our state needs to pursue and adopt, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk to you about it. Currently, members, under Texas law, we do not offer an accessible alternative for absentee ballots. It thus forcing voters who are already eligible to vote absentee to disclose their voting selections to a person assisting them if they're unable to go to a polling location. Voters with a print disability are the only category of eligible absentee voters that must be able to go to a polling location if they wish to cast a private, independent, and secure ballot. This bill, House Bill 3159, has been in the works for several years. This creates in statute an accessible absentee ballot system. When applying for an absentee ballot, the voter would indicate in a method established by the Secretary of State's office that they would like to receive an accessible absentee ballot. A ballot would then be sent to the voter electronically. They would utilize accessible technology such as a screen reader to mark that ballot. They would then print it and return it in the same way as any other absentee ballot is returned under current law. We're already doing this for military and for overseas voters. Those voters simply request their absentee ballot. It's delivered to them electronically. They print, fill out, and return the ballot in accordance with the same absentee ballot rules that apply to everyone else. This bill grants the Secretary of State's office rulemaking authority to implement this system. I would note that several other states have already implemented such a program, including Oklahoma, Ohio, Nevada, and a state we Texans like to talk a lot about recently, the state of Florida, among others. The committee substitute language is meant to clarify the intent of the bill and the goal that the bill is trying to accomplish. A couple points that I want to make clear. We are not, by way of this bill, expanding absentee eligibility. These Texans are already eligible. We're simply taking an existing process that has worked for several years for military overseas voters, and we're giving those who need adaptive technology access to that. Members, the most secure ballot, I believe, is the ballot that you cast yourself, and House Bill 3159 ensures that all of our citizens are able to do that, whether they're voting in person or whether they need to vote absentee. We've got a few witnesses here that I think can put more meat on the bone for you, can talk about how this would play out in practice. We have a resource witness from the Secretary of State's office here to answer any technical or logistical questions. We've also got a great resource witness from the Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. There's also a few citizens who, like I said, can tell you why they believe this is so important and the difference that this would make for them and for all of our voters with disabilities. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to lay this bill out. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I would request my right to close.
Thank you, Chairman. Your right to close is reserved. And members, do we have any questions of the chairman?
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. The chair calls Alan Vera. Good afternoon, Mr. Vera.
Good afternoon.
You are Alan Vera, and you are testifying on behalf of the Harris County Republican Party Ballot Security Committee. Is that all correct?
Correct.
And you're against the bill, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
We are regrettably opposed to the bill because of the way it's presented in the language. We agree with the goal, but this bill doesn't do it. The bill is heavy on assumptions and very light on process and the details of security. There's a good reason why the SAT and the LSAT and the other national testing organizations run things the way they do. It's because they want to be assured of both ends of the system that the correct person is taking the test, submitting the test, etc. This doesn't do that. The identity of the person requesting the ballot and the person fulfilling and submitting the ballot has to be confirmed. That's what we spent a lot of time doing last session. This doesn't yet do it. I don't see anything in the bill that says we're going to start adding IP addresses to the voter registration information. We think this can be done. We think this goal can be accomplished, but this is not the way to do it. You should also know that the military ballots and even the astronaut ballots, which all come to Harris County, are not secret ballots. They have to be reformatted. They have to be duplicated by workers who have to convert that. The last ballot received for the 2020 general election in November was from our astronaut on the space station. And my wife was one of the team of two, one Republican, one Democrat, who had to duplicate that ballot from the astronaut and to have it be properly scanned. This bill doesn't close the loopholes it needs to. We urge the committee to not accept this form. We're prepared to help and work on finding a better way to achieve the stated goal. Thank you.
Members, any questions of Mr. Vera? Mr. Vera, there is a provision on the very last part of the bill that provides that the Secretary of State can adopt rules and procedures. Is that something that you think you would be?
We'd prefer that be in statute, sir.
You'd like to have the details?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any details in mind?
Yes, sir, but obviously we want to preserve time.
Yeah. And
The issue of identification at both ends of the IP communication needs to be confirmed.
Okay.
And we have ways to, we think that can be done.
all right. Well, let's hear the rest of the testimony and see if we can't flesh that out. Thank you very much. Making sure it's not one of those names. The chair calls Natalie Ibe. Did I pronounce that right?
It's actually eBay.
eBay.
It's actually Nigerian. My ex-husband was Nigerian.
Okay. The chair
Natalie
calls
eBay.
Natalie, you are Natalie eBay,
Yes, sir.
and you're here on behalf of True Texas Project and yourself, is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And you're against the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you for time this morning.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have
Okay.
a few questions about how wide that gate could become. There's physical disabilities, there's mental disabilities, there's a lot of people who claim to be disabled for a lot of reasons. So that's one question I would have. The second is accountability. Who will ensure that those people are actually disabled? The third is accessibility. Someone can use a two-factor identification who's not disabled, so that could actually be anybody. So who would make sure that those people are disabled? And then my other question is, why not have those type of facilities where they can have the bill read to them at a separate location at the polling facilities, have a separate room, soundproof room, they go in there, They log in at it's not an internet, it's not an online procedure. It's a local electronic procedure. So I think that would allow them to do that. And if they are physically disabled, that, of course, could be a problem. But if they're blind or deaf, you wouldn't be able to read it to them. But I'd like to see those facilities at the local level and electronic and not digital, so that they're limited access to someone who's a hacker or someone who's imitating a disabled person. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you.
Welcome.
The chair calls Debbie Lindstrom. Did I get your last name correct?
Lindstrom, yes.
All right, let me just confirm. Thank you for being here today. We show you registered as Debbie Lindstrom on behalf of yourself, and you are against the bill. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, please proceed.
Okay, I'm strongly opposed to this bill. This bill would open the door to more e-voting, which is not acceptable to Texans who want locally controlled elections, and it opens the door for more state control. I've been studying election trends in the 2020 elections. I have taken snapshots of publicly available records and have noticed that our elections are a moving target. In the latest general election, the official Secretary of State voting roster history listed on the state website shows a pattern of voter modifications well past any reasonable period. So, how can we trust them to create this new system? I've included a chart with numbers of the changes, and I've given that to you. This is the mail-in voter history for November of 2022. From the end of November to the end of December, 206 voters were deleted and 596 new voters were added to the voter roster history. From the end of December to the end of February, 2,812 voters were added and almost 10,000 were deleted. From the end of February to the end of March, 1 voter was added and 4 were removed. Did these people vote or didn't they? How can we know when they are changing months after the vote has been certified? Is this a form of voter suppression? If you take the numbers of modifications to the voter roster history, it is approximately 13,500 votes that are affected. This is about 4% of the mail-in votes. I submit to you, if the Secretary of State cannot handle processing the mail-in data, and given that the voting roster is a moving target months and sometimes even years after a given election, how can we trust the Secretary of State to administer any type of new voting system? The purpose of this bill is to offer an accessible alternative to absentee ballots, but this solution is not the way to fix this issue. This bill would open the door to more electronic voting and more electronic systems that need monitoring. You are trying to solve a problem for a minority of voters by creating a bigger hole for fraud. In addition to my opposition to this bill before you, I would implore someone on this committee to start an investigation into the inner workings of the
Ma'am,
Secretary of
please just stay on
State.
the bill for.
This is the bill, because what they did was
Members, are there any questions? Chairman Leach?
Chairman, would you mind if I just ask just a couple questions?
Yeah, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to do so. You realize this bill was filed on March 1st, over a month ago. Did you know that?
I read the bill before I came.
Okay. Did you ever attempt to reach out to my office to communicate your concerns about the bill beforehand?
I read the bill. I just read it a couple of days ago. So that is the first time that I saw it, and I said that this is what is happening with the mail-in ballots if they cannot monitor them on the front end.
I heard your concerns. So you just read the bill for the first time a couple days ago?
Yes, sir.
And did you think to either earlier today or at any point since then to reach out to my office to communicate your concerns with me or to ask questions?
No, sir.
Okay. I would encourage you next time to do so, because I share some of the same concerns you have and some of the concerns the previous witnesses have brought up. I think that the first witness, the gentleman, said it right. We agree with the intent. It's the execution. But as the chairman said earlier, you realize that we've given the Secretary of State rulemaking authority to implement the intent of the bill
And
and then
that's
to
where the
address some of the
problem
things you're
is.
talking about.
That's where the
So
problem
you're
is.
saying, I just want to make sure I understand what your position is, because this is the first I'm hearing opposition from Republicans. You have a current trust issue with the Secretary of State, with our current Secretary of State?
If they cannot figure out who actually voted in an election, then that should cost.
My question is very simple. Do you or do you not trust our current Secretary of State?
The current Secretary of State is brand new. I do not have an opinion on her.
You don't have an opinion on Jane Nelson, who is awarded the Courageous Woman of the Year award by the Texas Federation
I
of
do not know
Republican
her
Women?
personally. I do not know, what her position and how she's going to function in this particular role.
Okay.
I need to see her, I need to see what she does before I can actually have a position on what I think about her.
Well,
her-
I do know Secretary of State Nelson. There's a reason the governor appointed her. There's a reason she was overwhelmingly, resoundingly, maybe unanimously approved and confirmed by the Senate. Her credentials as a trustworthy public servant, put her credentials as a rock-ribbed Republican aside. I don't think you would find a member in this building in either the House or the Senate that does not find Jane Nelson to be trustworthy. And if it is your position and the position of other witnesses that we don't trust our Secretary of State and her office to implement the rules in this bill, I just want to understand, is that your position?
My position is that I don't know anything about Jane Nelson, the Secretary of State's office. I have brought this to them for over a year, and no one has addressed this issue. So if there's a problem in the office, why won't they look at this?
Well, my bill has never been in front of the Secretary of State's office. This
I
bill has
understand that.
not.
I'm talking about mail-in ballots.
Okay.
All right, guys, I want
Mail-in
to
ballots,
make sure
they
we
are
stay
not-
on the
All
subject
right.
of the matter.
I understand your
This
position. I do
addresses
trust our Secretary of
mail-in-
State
All right.
to implement the rules.
This addresses mail-in voting, right?
Any other questions, Chairman? Chairman Caprigliano?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. So I do want to go on the bill, maybe specifically about which parts of the bills you have questions about. And it's not that long of a bill.
Correct.
So what this does is allows someone to mark the mail-in ballot. So let's take away, if you're opposed to mail-in ballots just as a fundamental principle, we'll just set that aside for a second. But in terms of this bill, do you have a problem with a way to mark the ballot other than by hand?
For a disabled person, is that, are you talking? or
Well,
any
I
person?
mean, since the bill says can be used for the sole purpose of enabling any voter, including a voter as a disability, to mark the voter's ballot. So let's start with that part. This bill is like a sentence. I mean, really, it's not that long. So do you have a problem with a tool that would mark a voter's ballot?
A tool that would mark.
I'm just reading the bill. Yeah. Do you have I'm going to put it in little stages. So do you have a problem with a voter using a
I
tool?
think the easiest way for a person to go and vote is to in person, as someone already.
I don't know if that's the easiest, but let's go and talk about the bill. So do you have a problem with someone who is going to do mail-in ballot voting, assuming that you're okay? Do you have a problem with them using a tool to mark the ballot?
I think that the way that the law is right now, I do not want it to be open to any kind of online voting.
Okay, I didn't say online, and this doesn't, as far as I can tell. Do
The-
you have a
those are the
problem?
Details, and so.
No, it has plenty of details. It does not say, what it says is, I'll just read it. An accessible absentee mail system, we'll call that the tool, must be a system, including software, used for the sole purpose of enabling any voter, including a voter who has a disability, to mark the voter's ballot. So I have a question here. Do you have a problem with electricity being used to go and mark the ballot? That's it.
I prefer paper ballots for a.
Well, this would
go
be,
in.
this would be on paper, right? I mean, so.
Go in person and handwrite on their ballot on paper. That is my preference.
So just to be clear, you're opposed to anything to do with mail-in ballot, and so it's not necessarily this
Not
bill.
anything. I mean, I think that there are valid reasons why I have 2 boys in the military. I want them to be able to vote, right?
And they have the opportunity, I think, to vote electronically.
Correct, but you're taking.
So do you have a problem with the military voting electronically?
I do not, because that's a
So if
very
they're
small
over-
population, and because you're opening, it's not defined here who is who is able to do this. This is anybody that has access to an absentee ballot, which is people over 65. It is people that are, disabled. Yes, they should be allowed to vote.
I'm just going to try one more time, and then I guess I'll stop this. Do you have a problem with a tool that marks
For a
the ballot?
limited number of people. How about if I say it that way? That number needs to be limited.
Okay,
to
so you don't
small
have a
number of
problem.
people.
Okay. So that's essentially, I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand, maybe the author can clear this up, but I mean, I think, like you mentioned, if you're in the military, you can vote electronically, which is different than this, but you have the opportunity to vote electronically. We agree that some people should be allowed to vote electronically, right?
Correct. But
Okay.
again, the way, as Mr. Vera explained, they are still, that's not a secret ballot. Once they turn in their piece of paper, then that piece of paper is duplicated. I've done that. I'm on the ballot board in my county.
What's duplicated?
So when a ballot comes in from the military, it is on a regular piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has to be transferred to a ballot that will actually run through the machines that are counting the ballots, right? So it has to be duplicated on that kind of paper.
But you're okay with that?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
I mean, you have trustworthy people. You usually have a Democrat and a Republican that are watching that process, and I'm fine with that because I
Okay.
think that's transparent. But it's not secret at that point.
Members, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, can I mention one other thing, if you don't mind? This bill, just to be very clear, is to benefit blind, visually impaired Texans, people with dyslexia, or persons with limited dexterity of their arms or hands, such as persons with quadriplegia. That's who this bill, that limited population, is meant to benefit, just to be clear.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
was
Thank you.
there- Can I ask?
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any other questions? Hearing none, thank you, ma'am. All right. Next up, the chair calls Chase Bearden. Thank you for being here. Just to confirm, you are Chase Bearden. You are here on behalf of the Coalition of Texans with Disabilities and yourself, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
I am. Thank you.
Please proceed with the testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, committee. I want to thank first Representative Leach for his work on this and helping us move this forward. This is something that was brought to us by many of our members, especially those who are visually impaired, wanting access to be able to cast their ballot themselves. And we've always said, and I think you hit it perfectly, the most secure ballot is the one you cast on your own. What this does, and it's very simple, we're using the same systems that any overseas person would use through UOCAVA. You know, you're able to basically, you're already marked that you have a disability and you're getting your mail-in ballot. There would be another box below it that says you just need the accessible format so that you can do it on your own. I think we've all seen these ballots. They're actually fairly small print. This just makes it so that person can use on their computer the assistive technology that the state pays for. Most people get training so that they can get employment to be able to read that on their own and mark it. You know, this is nothing about online voting and sending it back that way. It's just being able to mark and do that ballot yourself without anyone else assisting you. Now, why is that important? Sometimes when you have a disability and you're needing to do this, if you're at a polling site and you're getting assistance, people are behind you, they're rushing you, you don't have time to process it. And if you've ever tried to listen to a ballot through your headphones and go through that, knowing there's a line behind you, it's extremely difficult. So giving a person the ability, if they're wanting to do that at home, you know, if they can't even get into a ballot or into a polling place because they can't get access through transportation, this is a big issue for our community. Those that don't live in our community don't quite understand all the time how hard it can be to get to the polling site. And then there's others that will do any and everything they can because on election day they want to be there to cast their ballot. That's great when they can do that. But this does nothing but makes it so a person can mark that ballot, they can print it, sign it, and send it in. That is how we make a secure selection, and that's how we should be moving forward. We're more than happy to work with anyone to make sure the language is right, but at the end of the day, This is not moving us anywhere but actually kind of getting us to the point where the ADA says you have to have accessible formats for any of our state documents.
Mr. Bearden, can you elaborate? I think there's some confusion about the bill. Can you walk us through, for example, how this would work for somebody that's visually impaired and why it's so important?
Yes, so if you're visually impaired and you're already receiving your mail-in ballot at home, what this would do is, depending on which vendor they use, you would get your credentials, you would log on, you'd still have to give your driver's license number, all of those things. I have full faith that the Secretary of State's office will match the same procedures that everyone else uses in a mail-in ballot. Once they receive that and they've logged on and they download their ballot, their specific ballot for them, they would then use their assistive technology on their computer, which for anyone that has a laptop in here and you go to accessibility, you can do the speech to talk or the screen reader. And as they tab through it, it reads it to them through the speakers so they know what's on the screen. They're able to mark it, and then it reads back where they marked. Then they go to the next section. Once they're done, they hit print. This does not save. It doesn't allow you to do anything like that. You can't forward it on. You print it, you sign it, you put it in the envelope or whatever procedure that the Secretary of State's office brings forward, and then you mail it back like everyone else. Now, the comments that it's not going to be a secret ballot because someone's going to have to take it, I have faith that when my ballot gets there, that they're going to do it right and transfer it over. What most people don't realize is when you're getting assistance at home from a family member or a loved one, you may not agree with them on politics. You may not agree with your husband or your wife, and y'all may agree when you're talking, but when you get in the ballot box, you may have a different decision to make. A lot of people will vote the way they think their family members think they should. Now, granted, for some, that might be fine. For others, they want that independence, and I think we should allow it.
And to that point, I guess my last point that I want to hit home, if you can elaborate on it, it was said in the layout, you doubled down on it, that we've got top-down directive to make sure our elections are secure. Tell me why the quote is that the ballot that you cast yourself is the most secure. Can you explain that so we all understand what you're saying?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you're the one casting the ballot, we all say everyone's ballot counts. Every vote counts. Then let's make sure of that. Because if you're able to cast that yourself and you know it, and you're able to confirm that, if you're visually impaired, whoever's filling yours out, when you get the paper copy, not the accessible version, you have no idea what it says. You can't read that. So, this is one way of making it more secure because we're putting the power back into the hands of those who need it. Now, there may be some people that feel like this will be another loophole. Well, really and truly, at the end of the day, you can apply for your disability mail-in ballot already. No one's going to go extra steps to get the accessible one. The accessible one's going to take extra steps to get, but that only ensures then that that person is casting a secure ballot.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Bearden.
Thank you.
Members, I want them. So the chair calls Ron Lucy. Just to confirm, you are Ron Lucy. You are here on behalf of the Office of the Governor, Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities, and you are neutral on the bill and here as a resource witness. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So I am Ron Lucy. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Governor's Committee on People with Disabilities. For those of you that may not be familiar with our committee, we are a 12-member committee made up of members appointed by Governor Greg Abbott. At least 7 of our members are Texans with disabilities, and our primary function is to provide policy guidance to the Texas legislature and to the executive branch of government. In past biennial reports, we have carried accessible elections policy recommendations to recommend that all phases of the election from end to end are accessible so that voters with disabilities can cast an independent, secret, and secure ballot. I do have unique qualifications to serve as a resource on this bill. I am a voter who's legally blind. I have a vision impairment. The first time I voted was in 1986. However, the first time I voted independently was not until the 2000s when our county obtained the E-Slate voting system that would allow me to, for the first time, cast an independent secret ballot. My bona fides on elections, I served on the Secretary of State's first election advisory committee to develop rules for accessible voting in the early 2000s. I've served on 2 election study groups at the county level to develop specifications for accessible voting systems. And I have also served on the first election study group to get our county's first accessible voting system. I also served as a past digital accessibility coordinator for 5 health and human service agencies, providing accessibility testing, training, and consulting for those agencies. So I have experience using screen reader assistive technology every day in my job and understand the tremendous importance that providing an opportunity for a voter who has a disability to be able to cast their own independent ballot, how important that is for them. Looking at this very short bill, it does, I think people are interpreting it the same way I do. This is simply a different way to mark a ballot. Some people may mark a ballot with a pen. Some people may mark a ballot with a different type of pen. For me, I would use assistive technology to read the ballot to me out loud, and I would mark the ballot by hitting the space bar on the computer to mark that radio button for that one candidate, or arrow down or tab down to the next one. I also have a family member in my household who has cerebral palsy, and that family member would also be challenged to mark a ballot by pushing a ballpoint pen, and that family member uses a computer to fill out forms and mark things as well. So this would provide an opportunity. My own personal preference is to always vote in elections at my precinct, but I should have the same right as anybody else if I'm going to be absentee, not present on election day, or if I have a health care issue that would keep me from being able to vote in person. Having the option to cast an independent secret ballot should be the same right that anybody else has. I welcome any questions. If this bill were enacted, the Governor's Committee would certainly welcome the opportunity to serve as a resource to the Secretary of State to develop robust rules around the provisions of this law to make sure that all Texans can have the same franchise, the same right to cast an independent secret ballot. I welcome any questions you have.
All right, thank you, sir. Vice Chair Busey.
Yeah. Mr. Lucy, in 2019, the Governor's Office put out a disability recommendation list for the 86th legislature. Can you explain what the recommendations were regarding accessible mail-in ballots at that time?
Yeah, at that time, we also recognized the pilot program that the Secretary of State had to help overseas military voters cast their ballot digitally. And our recommendation was, as stated, to have all phases of the election process, from voter registration to voting, including absentee, to be fully accessible to people with disabilities. Now, this is somewhat different than what we see for overseas military voters who, in some of those solutions, are casting their vote digitally. This is literally marking your ballot, printing it out, and mailing it in like anyone else. In fact, with DREs in most precincts, we don't vote on our voting machine. We mark our ballot, and it's the precinct ballot counter that counts our ballot when we feed it into the machine. So all of us are using a different means of marking our ballot with most of the major voting systems that we have in Texas. When you likely go to your precinct to vote, you're using a touch screen. I use the headphones when I vote so I can hear the ballot, and I use a keypad that pulls out that allows me to mark my ballot. I'm not actually voting at that point. I'm simply marking my ballot. It gets printed, and then when I feed it into the precinct ballot counter, that's when I'm voting. And so most of us are already using technology to mark our ballot. This is just allowing voters with disabilities who are voting absentee to have that same privilege to mark their ballot using their own assistive technology.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Representative, you have Representative, or Chairman Capriglione.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. And I sincerely apologize for my naivete when it comes to how these tools are used. But for this system, if you're going to have it at home, I mean, is it purchased? Is it how does someone get access to this?
So assistive technology that people with disabilities use is either native to the operating system. As Mr. Bearden said earlier, the Windows operating system has a screen magnifier called Magnifier. You just type it in the run box of your Windows computer and it will come up and enlarge the viewport on your screen, or Narrator, which is a free screen reader. And then there are higher quality assistive technologies like the JAWS screen reader that is kind of a market leader. Even your iPhone has a screen reader called VoiceOver. If you were to tell Siri to turn on VoiceOver, and I hope I don't do that for everybody in the room, your phone would begin talking to you. And as you touched your emails or your text, it would read it out loud. There are certain gestures that people who are blind use to scan through the information on their iPhone. So technology is the great equalizer. They say that technology makes life better for people, but it makes life possible for people with disabilities. And this just allows people to use the tools that they already commonly use to perform other tasks of daily living, paying their bills, accessing the news, whatever tasks they do, but using their assistive technology for this one final task. I know what it's like to have to depend on others to read the ballot to me, because I had to do that for over a decade. And I've even had experiences where people read the ballot or marked my ballot incorrectly. And I caught it when I asked them what happened to that one ordinance or whatever that, received a lot of media attention, and I didn't hear them read it to me, and they said, "Oh, don't you remember you voted this way," which I certainly wouldn't have. And so I guess my point is, to reiterate, this makes elections more secure. The only person that knows how I want to vote is me, and this ensures that, like many other voters with disabilities, we get to reflect our intent by marking our ballot independently.
Great. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions of this witness? Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. The chair calls Christina Atkins.
Nope.
Oh, you can't go that line.
You can.
You are Christina Atkins here on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State, and you are neutral on the bill, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Atkins. Ms. Atkins is a resource witness for us. Members, you've heard some of the testimony, Ms. Atkins, and knowing you've read the bill up and down. Can you give us some ideas as to how we can accomplish this and have safe, secure elections?
Yes, sir. Just to clarify a few points, and I think Mr. Bearden did a good job of articulating this, but the bill itself is taking technology that's already available for military and overseas voters and allowing individuals with disabilities to use that technology as well. To be clear on a few points, we're not talking about online voting. The way I read this here, it's about delivery of balloting materials. It's about getting the materials to the voter so that they can use their technology, the adaptive technology that they have to mark the ballot. But these voters would still be expected to print the ballot, put it in the mail, and return it using the authorized methods for returning ballots. So we're not talking online voting. Just want to make sure that that's very clear. Another point that was brought up was the type of technology and the parameters that we would have to put in place regarding that technology. With respect to military and overseas voters, a lot of counties actually already use similar systems right now. So for those folks, it's just a matter of adding some additional users to the technology that they already have. When this first started to come about with the military and overseas voters, our office looked at a lot of the different vendors that were out there, and we wrote letters, indicating if a certain vendor was compliant with what we believe state law required with respect to this issue. And so when I see the language in here that says that the SOS shall adopt rules and prescribe procedures for implementation, my plan, if I'm the one that's making the decision on this, my plan is that we would create a similar approval process for the technology that's out there so that we could put some parameters in place to make sure that the systems that are out there, if a county wants to procure one of these systems or utilize some of these services, that it's as secure as it needs to be and compliant with what we believe Texas law outlines.
And how long do you think it would take? Do you have a ballpark guesstimate on that?
I actually don't think that it would take that long because this technology is widely used in other states and other jurisdictions. And so it's just a matter of defining some of those parameters. The primary one that I see that needs to be in place is that making sure that voter data is not transmitted over the internet, so that it's just they're receiving those materials, but they're not sending anything back. That's the primary issue that we would want to address. And I'm sure there's some other security parameters that we would want to put on there. We want to make sure that vendors that provide the software are operating with the highest security standards possible. But I think this is something that's already done, so it's a matter of just taking the defined vendors within the community, receiving demonstrations, and then providing parameters to them, and maybe coming up with an authorized list of users.
Okay. All right. Members, any other questions? Vice Chair Busey?
Just a real quick question. Would there be any federal aid or support for a program like this to implement?
That's a great question. I know right now that there are some federal grants that are available for individual or for counties for using this technology with their military and overseas voters. It's typically the same system. You would just be adding additional users to it. So if some of the counties have taken advantage of some of those federal grants to implement that technology already in their county, then it's just a matter of the cost of adding additional users to the system.
Awesome. Thank you.
Ms. Swanson?
Yes, thank you. Appreciate you being here. So I'm, as others say, I'm on board with this concept. Really want to listen to all sides, make sure that that we have it well designed. And Chairman Leach certainly has been trying to work with everybody on making sure that it's well done. So I have some sincere questions. Okay, now my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is you or anyone receiving these requests, the election administrators, county clerks, have no right to question whether the person really has a disability and what kind it is, right?
That's a great question. So the requests would be going to the counties because they're the ones that
Right.
mail out ballots. And that's correct. Yes, ma'am. So if somebody indicates on their application that they meet the eligibility requirements and they want to receive their ballot through this method, that the county would have to provide it that way.
If there was some move to get a lot of people to apply for this that weren't eligible and all of a sudden massive numbers or an unusual number of these applications come in, what could be done is there anything at all that could be done to make sure that it's not being abused?
That's a good question. So I would say that our election officials are very good at spotting patterns or noticing things that are out of the ordinary when it comes to things like ballot by mail or voter registration issues. I think we also, as we heard earlier, have some community members that pay a lot of attention to this issue and notice data trends. And so I think that if there were some unusual activity in that area, these are things that, issues that could be raised if we believe that there's some kind of criminal activity going on where somebody's using this improperly and violating the law. Those are issues that could be investigated by a local county or district attorney or even the attorney general's office.
But would they have the ability to? Because if you can't question the disability and you get far more applications, which of course none of us want, we want the right people doing this, would they even have the right to investigate? Like, how do we make sure that you could even do anything, even though, yeah, you see the pattern, like, oh, wow, this huge jump, but what can you do about it?
So what this reminds me of is a situation I believe it was in Dallas County about 4 or 5 years ago, where they had somebody that was improperly marking the assistant box. They were going around and they did hundreds of applications, marking themselves as the assistant. And it's something that the county became aware of. They noticed that when they were processing their mail ballots. And there was litigation with respect to this issue. They actually ended up segregating some of those mail ballots. And the courts, played a role in determining how those ballots were counted and processed, because it was very clear that there was some kind of misuse going on. When law enforcement was brought in, I think there was questioning of some of the voters that were on there, and people were indicating that they didn't have a role or they didn't request a mail ballot application. And so, again, I kind of go back to the notion that if you're seeing unusual activity in this area, our local officials are pretty good at noticing those trends and alerting law enforcement to it as it's happening, because that impacts the outcome of their election. We want our elections
Sure,
to be as
right.
challenge-free as possible. And when they see something that could impact whether or not their election is the likelihood of it being contested, they're going to draw attention to it and appropriately involve, law enforcement when necessary.
Right. So if people are expressing concern that this would cause more false voting of who knows who the person is, I can kind of see where they're coming from, that both this method and requesting the mail ballot would say you can't question their disability. So what I think they're feeling like is riskier is if it's going to them by email, how do we know who they are? Whereas a mail ballot, you've at least got to send to an address. So
No, I hear
tell
what
us,
you're
how do
saying
we
on
fix
that.
this? And what about that idea of the IP addresses? Just tell me whether you see it as riskier and what could we do to make it not riskier?
That's an excellent point, and I understand what you're asking now. So what I would say is that the technology that's out there and the systems that are available now, when they're delivering these balloting materials electronically, a lot of these vendors that provide this software have like a portal that the person logs into, so there's authentication that they have to do. And I believe those authentication standards, what it takes to get into the portal can be customizable, and that's something that I can do a little bit of research on and let you know if there are some things that we need to think of ahead of time in looking at the law in this area. But I think that with those authentication standards, just like our ballot by mail tracker, we require certain data points like driver's license, social security number, date of birth. Those are the kinds of things that you need to get into the ballot by mail tracker. We could have authentication that's similar to that for these systems as well.
Right, because that would be my concern. There's only so many mail ballots you can have sent to one address once we, I think, got it shut down where you can't send them to a little UPS post office. So
and I would say
that's easier to
apply
notice.
too.
This email, you can set up unlimited email addresses. How do we fix that? How do we make this secure?
Those are good questions, and those are things where I think if our office is charged with prescribing rules to implement this, we would get the right stakeholders at the table. We would talk to some of those experts with respect to the technology and the security issues to make sure that we're putting parameters in place for anybody that wants to utilize the software. So parameters on place, with respect to authentication and being able to access those materials that are sent to you, but also the vendors that are being used. We want to have high security standards in place for those that are operating the software.
Have y'all done any research yet? Is there anything y'all could show us between now and the time we vote that would go, well, we found out we can do this, and so it'll be safe? Like, help us feel good about this.
Yes, ma'am. I've talked to a couple of vendors about this, just looking at the legislation, and there was another bill filed that actually was a little bit broader than this. And so in looking at these different bills that were moving this direction, I have reached out to some vendors to try to see what was out there so that we could better understand the scope and potential cost issues. So I can provide some additional information to you. I can see what we have that's out there, what those security measures are in place with respect to operating the systems, and I would say with authentication, how the voter accesses it, and we can provide that information to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Atkins. 2, 4, 6, 9. The chair calls Ed Jones. Johnson, excuse me. 2, 4, 6, 9. I don't know how I got that wrong.
New witness.
It's good to see you again, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for being
Likewise.
here. You are here on behalf of yourself and against the bill, is that correct?
That is correct.
Go ahead.
Yes, I've spent numerous years in the Harris County Election Office running these things, and that's the big, and by all means, we always tried to do everything we could to help handicap vote. Electronic voting machines, and made sure they had Braille on them, that make sure they had good, make sure they had speakers that they could hear if you go in person to vote. But the big gaping hole in actually voting by mail and applying for the ballot is that you can't, according to the federal government, the ADA Association and the Department of Justice, you cannot question a voter's disability. If they claim they have a disability, you're instructing, instructions from the Secretary of State seminar say you can tell the election judges they cannot question that voter. We can't question that voter when they send in an application of what is your disability. So that's the big gaping hole in this. There is zero enforcement to it. And if someone wants to abuse this, they can do it. And there's nothing that the election administrator, to your question, Representative Swanson, there's nothing the election administrator or county clerk can do to not count those ballots. When they send those applications out, and even if they see a pattern, those ballots are going to be counted because they're the legitimate ballots that came back. Now, on this process of sending the ballots out email, all the overseas ballots, I will tell you, their, I guess, secret ballot has been done away with. When you send these out and it's printed off of a printer and mailed back to the voter registration office, that is not an official ballot that the scanning machine would accept. So as described earlier, you have to copy that onto an official piece of ballot paper. And all the documentation that came with the original ballot is kept with that ballot that you have now just duplicated to run through the scanning machine. So that person's name, where it came from, their mocked up ballot, all is saved in the files at the clerk's office. So at any time you can go and look and see how any of these people overseas vote. I can tell you how every astronaut when I worked in office voted because we had to copy their ballots. So that's what you're going to put onto these handicapped people. You'll know exactly how they vote because the secret ballot will be done away with in this process. So it's a problem. And I have two cousins that are actually blind, seeing eye dogs type blind. They can't navigate at all. And when they get documents and everything, they have the ability to have a scanner that scans it. And then they have a computer and that has Braille on the typewriter and they're able to mark it and everything. So they could get their paper ballot, just scan it in, and the software would be able to do the same thing, read it and all those good things, print it out and mail it in under current law. So, the ballot marking tool is very nice for them, but it's something that they could probably do on their own right now with the paper ballot there. And
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Members, any questions, Mr. Johnson? Yes, Representative Swanson.
So what would it take for you to feel like that these ballots delivered this way are just as secure as mail ballots sent out to disabled people?
Well, as Mr. Barrow was saying, Alan Barrow was saying, you need to have some kind of software that's hopefully going to try to track the IP addresses that these emails are being sent to. Unfortunately, hackers are getting a lot more sophisticated. I get phone calls and texts from my own phone number all the time. They can spoof these IP addresses. If I was going forward with this, and I know there are possible litigations that could, implement this state, federally, state, U.S.-wide. If we want to try to get ahead of that curve, I would say you should really start with a pilot program on this. You should select a county. If you're moving forward with this, select a county and iron out all these rules, find all these technologies that you can do and put them through a test before you implement this statewide where you find out you have a whole bunch of problems. A pilot program would be, in my opinion, an excellent thing to do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Thank you, Representative Johnson, or Mr. Johnson.
I got
We don't give you any ideas, do we? Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair calls Kristen Plaisance. I'm really not pronouncing that right. Plaisance. Kristen Plaisance. Kristen Plaisance. We show her as testifying on behalf of herself and against the bill. She is not here. The chair calls Eric Opiella. Members, we just have a couple more witnesses on this bill. I'd appreciate everybody holding because we're going to vote after this bill, and I think Representative Cabriglione is on his way back. Would you state your name for the record?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members, Eric Opiella.
You're here on behalf of yourself, and you are neutral on the bill, is that correct?
That is correct.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members, I'm Eric Opiella, Board Certified Legislative Campaign Law Attorney, and I'm testifying on House Bill 3159. 3159 establishes a new method of voting using online ballot delivery for voters with disabilities. The committee substitute, as drafted, does not adequately limit this process to voters who need assistive devices and potentially opens up this process to abuse by campaign workers who can abuse this online process to take advantage of some of our most vulnerable voters. If this process is added to the election code, the statute needs to provide a specific framework for certification of hardware and software systems, address concerns raised from where this has been implemented in other states with regard to marketing by campaigns, side-loaded political advertising while balloting, which can be displayed while the voter is voting, and address illegal assistance concerns. Recent court cases and guidance from the Election Assistance Commission make clear that electronic digital signatures are part and parcel of an accessible ballot system. We need to set up the framework for verifying the identity of voters choosing to vote by this method as a result, especially the language in subsection A that says, quote, notwithstanding any other provision of this title, could be read to eliminate all other protections in the election code currently which protect voters with disabilities against abuse. This statute needs to address a specific process for casting, marking, signing, and delivering these ballots. In the 2017 legislative session, this committee passed a process which was later removed in a special session that sought to provide a framework for protecting voters in assisted living facilities, adult daycare facilities, and others in need of assistance that could provide, with updated simultaneous two-way communication technologies, a process for ensuring voters with disabilities have the ability to cast a secret ballot, free from influence. It gives them the assurance that their vote will be counted as they cast it. While some of these measures could be specified in Secretary of State rule, it's important that statute set forth these provisions specifically to ensure all stakeholders are heard and that the process is not subject to modifications like we've seen in recent elections by freelancing election officials. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that Chairman Burrows is here with us. Members, any questions? Okay, thank you so much. The chair calls Cindy Castilla.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and
Your
committee
name is
members.
Cindy Castilla?
Cindy Castilla.
Hold on just a second. You're here on behalf of the Texas Eagle Forum and yourself, and you're against the bill, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
And I was not planning to testify, but, and I appreciate the last neutral testimony. It contains some of our same questions. The bill itself says enabling any voter, including a voter who has a disability. Now, I know you did a substitute, so did you take out that any voter language on the substitute? Because we don't have a chance, don't have that. It's line 14 on the original.
Ma'am, I think that.
Oh, okay,
But-
okay.
We can certainly recognize the chairman, though, if you'd like to answer that question.
So Cindy, you don't have the committee sub in front of you?
I do not.
Because yes, that was changed in the committee.
So the any voter is gone.
It's now enabling a voter who has a disability and needs assistive technology for marking or reading the ballot.
Okay, so you're limiting it there, but then what happens when you, and I know I can't ask you a question, so I'm just saying my concern would be that in 82.002, we've got things included there like the person is afraid of injuring their health, and so they're not going to go vote. I think that opens it wide for abuse by people who do not need to use a system like this. And I think it could overwhelm the system when you open it that wide. So I think that section has to be taken care of. It's pretty open. You're expecting to have a child in the next 3 weeks, or you're afraid of injuring your health. I think of COVID and what happened in several of our big counties. As far as collecting votes in unusual ways and with suspect results in some cases. And so not even considering electronic fraud, we've got just this concern that people will abuse this.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you very much.
That's it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Members, any questions, Ms. Castilla? Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3159? Seeing no one, the chair recognizes Representative Leach or Chairman Leach to close on House Bill 3159.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Busey, and members. Appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to lay out this committee sub. The intent of the bill is clear. This population of Texans deserves for us to lock arms with them and to figure this out. Some good questions have been presented today. Some understandable concerns have been expressed. And I, like always, have an open door, wide open door to work with anyone, with the Secretary of State's office and with you to perfect this. I think we need to do this. I believe very strongly we need to do it, and we need to do it now. And I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, to effectuate the intent of the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate you bringing the bill. Vice Chair Busey.
I just want to say, Chairman Leach, thank you so much for working on this. What we're trying to do here is have a more secure and also more accessible ballot for Texans with disabilities to be able to participate in this process. So thank you for your leadership on the bill. Happy to find a solution with it.
Any other questions, members? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
The committee substitute is withdrawn. If there is no objection, House Bill 3159 will be left pending. I hear no objection. House Bill 3159 is left pending. Members, now that we have everyone here, we'll now vote out several bills which we have heard in previous hearings. The chair lays out, is everybody prepared? The chair lays out House Bill 87 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the presidential electors of the state. Representative Swanson offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 87 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep. Burrows,
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione,
Aye.
Rep. Deola, Rep. Manuel, Rep. Morales,
Aye.
Rep. Swanson,
Aye.
Rep. Vo.
Aye.
9.
There being 9 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 1003 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to ineligibility to serve as a poll watcher. Representative Burrows offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 1003 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
No.
Rep. Burrows,
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione,
Aye.
Rep. Deola, Rep. Manuel,
No.
Rep. Morales,
Aye.
Rep. Swanson,
Aye.
Rep. Vo.
There being 6 ayes and 3 nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 2800 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to meetings of a county election board. The chair moves that HB 2800 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep. Burrows,
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione,
Aye.
Rep. Deola,
Aye.
Rep. Manuel,
Aye.
Rep. Morales,
Aye.
Rep. Swanson,
Aye.
Rep. Vo.
Aye.
There being 9 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 386 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we have heard previously relating to accommodating a voter unable to enter a polling place. Vice Chair Busey moves that HB 386 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep. Burrows,
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione, Rep. Deola, Rep. Manuel,
Aye.
Rep. Morales,
Aye.
Rep. Swanson,
Aye.
Rep. Vo.
Aye.
9.
There being 9 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 2629 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to the reporting of direct campaign expenditures by certain persons and political committees. Representative De Ayala moves that HB 2629 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith,
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey,
Aye.
Rep. Burrows,
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione,
Aye.
Rep. Deola, Rep. Manuel. Rep. Morales. Rep. Swanson. Rep. Vo. 9.
There being 9 ayes and no nays, the motion prevails. Chair lays out HB 2351 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to renewal of an appointment as a volunteer deputy registrar. Vice Chair Busey moves that HB 2351 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Rep. Burrows.
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione.
No.
Rep. Deala.
Aye.
Rep. Manuel.
Aye.
Rep. Morales.
Aye.
Rep. Swanson.
Nay.
Rep. Vo.
Aye.
7.
There be 7 ayes and 2 nays. The motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 380 as pending business. Members, this is a bill we heard previously relating to the Secretary of State posting on the Secretary of State's internet website databases containing certain information about elections. Representative Manuel offers a committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none, and the substitute is adopted. The chair moves that HB 380 as substituted be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
Aye.
Rep. Burrows.
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione.
Aye.
Rep. Deala.
Aye.
Rep. Manuel.
Aye.
Rep. Morales.
Aye.
Swanson.
Nay.
Rep. Vo.
Aye.
8.
There being 8 ayes and 1 nay, the motion prevails. The chair lays out HB 1848 as pending business. Members, this is the bill we heard previously relating to a study by the Secretary of State on the feasibility of central counting stations complying with federal standards for facilities that contain sensitive information. Representative Capriglione moves that HB 1848 without amendment be reported favorably to the full House with a recommendation that it do pass and be printed. The clerk will call the roll.
Chair Smith.
Aye.
Vice Chair Busey.
No.
Rep. Burrows.
Aye.
Rep. Capriglione.
Aye.
Rep. Deala.
Aye.
Rep. Manuel.
No.
Rep. Morales.
Aye.
Rep. Swanson.
Aye.
Rep. Vo.
No.
6.
There being 6 ayes and 3 nays, the motion prevails. Thank you, members, for everybody being able to make it here and get some of these things voted out. I appreciate it very much. The chair lays out House Bill 1980 and recognizes Representative DeRazio to explain the bill. Representative, thank you for your patience.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. This is the first bill I've ever laid out, so I appreciate your patience.
And hold on just 1 second, because I believe we have a substitute. The chair offers a committee substitute. Okay, and you go
Yes,
right
sir.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. When people surrender their Texas driver's license and apply for a personal identification certificate to serve as their official state-issued photo ID, many do not update their voter registration. The majority of the people in this situation are elderly citizens who vote, who's been voters for many years, but can no longer drive. Ballot boards learned during the last election that people used this new identification certificate number on their ballot by mail to be notified that there was a defect of their carrier envelope. And all but a handful of these ballots were ultimately rejected. Voters did not anticipate their voter records do not contain their new identification number and had no idea their ballots would be rejected if they could not physically get to the county elections office within a few days. This can be easily remedied at the time they are issued their new certificates at the Department of Public Safety. 1980 proposes that when a person goes to the DPS, surrenders their driver's license, and applies for a personal identification certificate, they will be offered the opportunity to update their voter registration with their Texas Personal Identification Certificate number. At the same time, their new ID is being issued. I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Representative. Vice Chair Busey.
I just want to say, 1, congrats on your first bill, but 2, We've been working together on this bill since the beginning of session, and I appreciate you working and your ability to want to try to get so much buy-in and on this committee substitute. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you for your diligence on this bill and working with everybody.
Well, thank you, Representative Lucy.
Representative Swanson.
Yes, I wanted to haze you since it's your first bill, but unfortunately, I'm a joint author, so I can't tell you that it's a terrible bill, so it must be great.
Well, thank you.
And I'm not going to haze you either. Anybody else have any other questions?
I can't haze you because I'm
Yeah, that's right. You have to stand with him over there, don't you? That's right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I just reserve the right to close.
All right. We appreciate you. I'm going to try and do this here. The chair calls Alan Vera. Sir, you are Alan Vera, and you're here on behalf of the Harris County Republican Party Ballot Security Committee, and you are neutral on the bill, is that right?
That's correct.
Go ahead.
We could support the bill with one tiny additional phrase. In section 521.101 M4, please consider adding the following phrase to the beginning of 4. If that person still meets the qualifications to be a registered voter in the state, and continue what you have. DPS already has the process in place to allow the only online voter registration process in Texas. Accommodating that short added phrase will not be a problem for DPS. We don't want DPS to inadvertently cause an unqualified person to mistakenly believe they're qualified to submit a registration form just because somebody from DPS handed it to them. Belt and suspenders. With that small edit, we could support HB 1980. Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you, Mr. Vera, for your input. The chair calls Cindy Castilla. Ma'am, you are Cindy Castilla. You're here on behalf of the Texas Eagle Forum and yourself, and you're for the bill, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
I do like that edit, but we like this bill and we appreciate Rep. Drazia working with us to make a few little adjustments to the language. And we don't want our elderly people disenfranchised from voting just through an accidental situation. And not all counties, most counties don't help their votes get counted when they run into this. So we appreciate the effort to keep them as voters. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions? Thank you. The chair calls Karen Marshall. Your name is Karen Marshall, and you are here on behalf of yourself, and you're for the bill, is that right?
Yes, sir. And I was invited testimony.
Okay.
I guess I didn't put that.
Let's see. I don't know if that's something that hold on just one second. You go right ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman. I think I could be called one of the instigators behind this bill. My name is Karen Marshall, and I live in San Antonio, and I was the alternate judge of the Bexar County Early Voting Ballot Board for the November 2022 election. About a week into processing over 31,000 ballots by mail delivered to Bexar elections, our ballot board picked up on a pattern. Many of the ID numbers we were finding that did not match voters' records began with the number 4. Looking into it, we found out that many of the numbers on the new Texas identification certificates begin with the number 4. As we worked in teams, it reached the point where we took turns groaning when we saw the number 4 at the beginning of an ID number because it inevitably meant that we would be rejecting the ballot and would need to try to reach the voter. When we called these voters with ID number discrepancies to alert them that they would need to take action before we could process their ballots, we found that these were seniors, many over 80, who couldn't drive. I can pretty much count on one hand the number of people with this issue who I saw made it into Bexar Elections office within the 6-day period allotted to make the corrections needed. We spoke on the phone to several who said they were not sure if they would be able to get into the elections office, saying they didn't want to bother their son at work or their daughter was out of town, or they did not know if they could get a ride from their community's van. One lady said, I don't have my driver's license anymore. The government gave me a new card. You work for the government. Don't you have the number? After the election, I called 4 other counties' ballot boards to see if they had experienced a similar trend and found that their experiences were consistent with ours, although the smaller counties had not encountered enough of these to recognize what was the cause. One said, "Oh, is that what those random numbers were?" We couldn't figure out what those were because they weren't VUIDs or phone numbers. Representative DeRazio's HB 1980 will by and large help elderly voters who have been voting for many years, have not moved, registered to vote many years ago, and no longer drive. It will also help all the members of ballot boards averse to rejecting these mostly elderly voters' ballots. Please make the number 4 insignificant again by voting for HB 1980.
I do have a question.
Representative Swanson.
Thank you for bringing this forward. I think it's really important, and it was great to hear your personal testimony. So I wonder if we could add something to the bill to make it where DPS has to tie that number together. Like, shame on them for letting us get in this situation. Couldn't there be something where this should have been anticipated? You shouldn't have to fix your voter registration. They should have either just kept the same number, put an A or a B on the end, something where this problem wouldn't be caused at all.
The way it was explained to me is that the type of identification is coded into the number, so they can't use the same kind of numbers for identification cards as they do for driver's license, because the way they can tell it's a driver's license number just by seeing the number because of the way or order of it. So they can't use the same numbers, like reuse them on the people's voter ID.
I understand that, but I don't know why they couldn't just add an A or a B or something, and then elections officials be told, well, recognize this even with this extra letter on the end.
Certainly, but all I can testify is to the problem I
Right.
witnessed.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? All right, thank you, Ms. Marshall. The chair calls Dr. Susana Carranza. Dr. Carranza, you are Susana Carranza. You're here on behalf of yourself and you're for the bill, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Go ahead.
If anybody noticed by now, like anything that helps voters, I'm in favor, and this bill helps voters. I was a little bit, I wasn't sure if there was a sub or not, but the only thing that, if there was a change in the original text of the bill, is that instead of having to fill out a form, that the process be more automated, and, you know, if the DPS is issuing an ID, why does the voter even have to do anything else? It should just automatically change, but helps the voter. I'm for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Members, any questions? Thank you for being here, Ms. Carranza. The chair calls Rebecca Hibbs. Ma'am, is your name Rebecca Hibbs?
Yes, sir.
And are you here on behalf of the Texas Department of Public Safety?
Yes, sir, I am.
And are you on the bill or neutral?
I am neutral, yes.
Go ahead.
I'm here to answer any questions y'all may have.
Members, any questions of this witness? Yes,
Thank you.
Representative Swanson.
Just so happen I do. I'm distressed that DPS put us in this position. I realize y'all don't really necessarily click that y'all are so tied into voting, but what could be done to make it where when people switch, y'all either automatically send to the Texas Secretary of State, we switch this person from this driver's license number to this ID number. That could be automatically sent, that stuff could be automatically sent down to the counties, and nobody would be getting rejected. Don't get me wrong, I like Representative DeRazio's bill. I just would also like something automatic. I don't think we should have ended up in this problem. They also could be DPS, why can't they just put a whatever, something on the end of the number that, like, the driver's license number has these digits, but we add, you know, an I on the end, and that means it's an ID card only. The officers could tell automatically this is only an ID number, but elections officials could be instructed to ignore that for purposes of identifying whether this is still the same person. So you tell me, like, what's to keep us from fixing this?
So to address all of your questions, so for the first part, when a person comes in and obtains either a driver license or an identification card, they fill out a form, the same form. And so that form also has the voter registration questions on it. They are allowed to opt in, so it's not required of them. Once they complete that, we enter that information and send it. If a person comes in and changes their card, so let's say they need to surrender from a DL to an ID, it's a whole new card, so we go through the same process. They complete the same form. We encourage them to fill out the form to update their voter registration because it does issue a new number. Now, that number is randomized by our system, so it's not something where you can say all threes are DLs or all fours are IDs. It's the very next number that the person gets issued, and that's statewide. Those numbers are standardized to 8 digits right now, so that's just numbers. We don't have letters in our system. So it's really up to us to be able to make sure that when we send that information out, we do send it to the Secretary of State's office every night, daily, when the person completes the voter registration. But if they don't complete the voter registration, then the only thing we can do is just basically encourage that person to still fill out the form and tell them that that's how the Secretary of State's office will be able to know that they've changed their number.
Right, but what you're telling me is what you currently do. And my question is, why can't you fix this to where your numbers, you don't give them a new number, you merely add an I or ID on the end of it. You add something that indicates to officers who are stopping them that they don't have a driver's license, but it's still the same number. That would allow all your elections officials to realize it's still the same number, it's the same person. Their ballots would not be getting rejected. And if you really, for some reason, did feel like you just got to give them a brand new number, why not then automatically forward that to the Secretary of State? Here's a person, they turned in this driver's license number, you tell everything about the person, they now have this ID number. What's to keep you from doing those two things? So I'm not looking at what you do now, what's to keep you from doing one of the two things I'm asking you about?
I think being able to, let's address the second one because that might be easier from a programming perspective. For
Okay.
us to be able to look at changing the programming within our system that says instead of us just notifying them when the person selects it, if we see that there is a same record that's already been registered to vote and we have it in the history for that person, then we could potentially go through and send that to the Secretary of State's office. Changing the number would be much more programming, and it would also be something where we would have to make sure that law enforcement understands that we're changing from just numbers to adding numbers and letters. That's not standardized for.
I don't care, put an extra number on the end, something, or an extra, but something where it's still their same driver's license number, but all election officials would be told, ignore that number on the end, and it'll match.
Yeah. We can definitely go in and look at that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Members, any other questions? Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time. The chair calls Valerie DeBille. Valerie DeBille, there she is. All right. Bigger room. You are Valerie DeBille. You're here on behalf of yourself and you're for the bill. Is that all right?
That is correct.
Okay, go ahead.
If only somebody had warned y'all when you were passing SB 2 that this might be an issue. I do believe I did bring that up at the time. I mentioned previously in previous testimony on a different bill that I had a 93-year-old woman call the hotline who could not look up her mail ballot because, yeah, she was 93 and she hadn't had a driver's license in, 20 years and had switched to an ID card, and that never got updated. So she couldn't use the Secretary of State portal because it required both the Social Security number and the driver's license, and clearly it hadn't been updated. She couldn't do it over the phone with I think she was Denton County. She couldn't do it over the phone with the county, and so it was like this whole thing that, and again, like the previous witness said, she didn't have anybody who could drive her to the county to fix that. So she just kind of had to cross her fingers and hope that her ballot got received because she couldn't track it. Another issue that is related to this is that, like the DPS witness said, if somebody is already registered to vote, there is no reason that they would think they needed to check that box when they're getting a new card. And so if their number changes, there's no indication at any point that an action needs to be taken on the part of a DPS unless there is some sort of special process that if you're changing from one type to another, which could be either the driver's license to an ID or we have a lot of problems with kids who have permits when they're almost 18 and they register to vote. And then when it switches to a driver's license, that's a different number. And so that doesn't get updated. So there's a bunch of different types of ID, and then there's the election identification certificate, which is also, all of those have the same number of digits, but they're all different formats of number. And so the fact that those numbers don't travel when they switch from one type to another, and there's multiple phases in your life when you might change from one to another, and there is no process for calling that out. I run into a lot of folks who, when I'm out registering voters, they'll say, well, I checked the box at DPS, but I'm not showing up in the system. And I don't know what to tell them because if they check the box, they check the box, but we don't know what the point of failure is on that. It might be that they didn't really check the box. It might be that they moved from maybe a driver's license to an ID or something like that, and the numbers just don't correspond anymore. And so when you look yourself up on the Secretary of State's voter lookup, one of the options is driver's license and date of birth. And that's the easiest way to do it because there's no typos. But it's also, if it's attached to a different type of number, it's useless.
Thank you, Ms. DeBille. Members, any questions? Thank you for your input. The chair calls Christina Atkins. Thank you for being here, Ms. Atkins. You're Christina Atkins. You are here on behalf of the Texas Secretary of State, and you are neutral on the bill.
Yes, sir.
We have a resource witness. Members, y'all have any questions?
I do.
Representative Swanson.
Thank you. Can you address the ideas I just brought forth? And again, I love this bill, but I'd also like to fix it on the other end because I don't think we should be having this problem. So tell us on the idea that they could perhaps just automatically add this extra number on the end. Your election officials know to ignore that that's the same person. And then the secondary idea was if they just can't do that because they love to make new numbers, then, this random number thing must be fun or something. I'm sorry, but how would that work if you guys then, if they had to notify you, a person turned in a driver's license with this number, we gave them this ID number. If they sent that to you, then how well would that get back to the counties and what would that look like?
So on the first question that you were asking, in many ways, I'm going to have to defer to Ms. Hibbs on that because it's a programming issue on the DPS side. But I would add on that, I want to be real careful about giving instructions to our ballot board members that would tell them to disregard any numbers on that identification component because we want them doing that comparison. That was something that was added in Senate Bill 1.
Even if you just said, oh, this will have one last digit because of this, so ignore the last digit. You wouldn't feel comfortable with that?
All I would say is that there are, other implications in the law that we would want to probably think about because that ID requirement is, that comparison is required.
Right.
And so telling them to, ignore a number that's on there is contrary to what the stated law says with respect to the ID matching. So we'd probably need to look at some other provisions and just be kind of cautious about any instructions we give like that. And I'm a little, our office tries to be very sensitive to that because we get accused of waiving state law all the time. And so I want to make it really clear that it would have to be something in the statute that authorizes that. We don't want to be known for waiving, modifying, suspending state law in any way, shape, or form. On the second issue, I think the committee substitute actually addresses your concern there. If you look at
okay.
the committee
I'm sorry if I
substitute, and
missed
you look
that.
at the language that's there, the second part of it, it talks about providing notification to the voter, of the need to make that update. So it sounds like that's something that I'm imagining that DPS, it's going to be a training issue with DPS where they're going to be
Okay,
incorporating that
that's,
into their services.
I'm sorry, I do think we should have that.
Mhm.
My thing is different. My thing is DPS then has to notify everybody who switches.
Mhm.
And we could throw in this thing, if you have a permit, you switch numbers. And they've got to notify y'all of that. And you go, oh, yeah, that person's registered to vote. We'll get that switch. And we'll tell the counties. But this one that they're talking about, Mr. Jones goes in with a driver's license that he can't use anymore. He switches to an ID. I want to require DPS to send that info to you, and then you update that on the statewide system, and then I'm assuming it would get back to the counties, because I agree with the previous witness who said that why would any of these folks think they need to re-register? They wouldn't understand that. And we do need to tell them they need to, but on the other hand, why have the problem at all? I just think we could make it where DPS has to notify you, and we put it in the law that y'all are allowed to update it, and you get it to the counties. Well, would that be doable?
So we actually have some pretty great automated processes with DPS right now, where we're pretty good at getting data from them. There's even a lot of data that we get on a day-to-day basis. So we can sit down and look at the law there and figure out to implement what you're describing there. One, is that feasible and doable? And two, are there any legal hurdles that we'd have to jump over or address in the law in order to do that? So we're happy to sit down with them and see if there is something in there that can be done. What I think would probably come up is that changing that number is in fact an update to a voter registration record on some level. And so that's why I think right now it's dependent on that voter marking that box that says, yes, I want to update my registration. But all that being said, there is a lot of data that we do get from DPS to supplement missing information in voter registration records. This may be something that we can look at. So I'm happy to work with Ms. Hibbs and DPS to see if there's any other holes there that we can address.
And can you work with the bill author to see whether there's anything that could be added to require that? And of course, then he'd need to figure out with the parliamentarians whether that was germane. I would appreciate it if you could work with him. I hate to miss this opportunity to fix this problem.
Absolutely. I think we can all sit down and look at it and see if there's a way to address these concerns.
Great. Thank you.
Members, any other questions of Ms. Atkins? Ms. Atkins, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for all you do for us. I know you're still going to be here a while, but
Yes, sir.
we appreciate your help. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1980? If not, the chair recognizes Representative DeRazio to close on his bill.
There was a hand raised in the back. Eric Opiella raised his hand.
Oh, do we have another witness? Yep. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Representative Swanson, for,
Register you, I don't show you as,
I filled it out online, but I'll redo it again.
yeah, we just need to have you in there, I don't see it right now, Eric.
just a second.
Can you register?
I'll do it real quick. Didn't mean to cause you so much trouble here.
You're good.
It's like a dark, sleepy room. I hate this room. Ironically, it's the only one with windows, but it feels dark.
There we go.
There we go, you're on there now.
All right, so, sir, you certainly are Eric Opiella, and you're here on behalf of yourself, and you're for the bill, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
This is a very important piece of legislation. I'm not going to reiterate all the rest of the items that other witnesses had stated. It's a bipartisan bill. It's the Senate companion, sponsored by Senator Menendez over in the Senate. It's very important that we provide opportunities for people to correct these problems. But I want to bring your attention to another inconsistency between the transportation code and the election code that is implicated by this bill. The transportation code calls this a personal identification certificate. The election code calls it a personal identification card, probably because we have another certificate called an election identification certificate that was created by Senate Bill 5 back in 2017. And so we have voters that are confused because all three of these, a driver's license, a personal identification certificate, or an election or personal identification card, depending on which code you look at, or the election identification certificate, can be put on that mail-in ballot as that number. And like Representative Swanson said, all these numbers are different. And so potentially we have an opportunity with this bill, whether or not it's germane, I think it's up to our parliamentarians, to eliminate this confusion with these election identification certificates. I understand from talking with the Secretary of State's office a year, it's been more than that, ago, that there's only about 1,000 individuals statewide who have been issued these election identification certificates under Senate Bill 5 from the Secretary of State's office using that same 8-digit number. And so perhaps we have an opportunity to consolidate those either into a personal identification card or certificate, whichever one we settle on what it's called, and eliminate that confusion by people who might have all three and get confused and get their mail ballots unfortunately rejected, not through any fault of their own.
Great testimony. Members, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 1980? If not, the chair recognizes Representative DeRazio to close on his bill.
Members, again, thank you for your time. You know, I appreciate all the testimony and all the questions it answered, because it really, with all of us, it helped bring a lot of clarification, especially to this bill, things that I never even knew of what this bill addresses. So I want to thank everyone who testified. This bill is a common sense solution to the elderly voters being disenfranchised in the voter process, and I think we have some solutions here. And I would ask the committee to report favorably on 1980, and I'd recommend that it be sent to local and consent. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Committee, thank you. I'll yield my time.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to tell you how to do your own bill, but I would just ask that you work with the stakeholders and particularly with Mr. Opiella, and maybe we can do something in addition to what you have going on. You also want to check with the parliamentarians to make sure that we're germane.
Absolutely.
We appreciate you very much. The committee substitute is withdrawn. If there's no questions do you have a question? Anyone? If there's no question, the committee substitute is withdrawn. If there's no objection, House Bill 1980 will be left pending. I hear no objection. The chair hears that House Bill 1980 is left pending. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
I don't want to get Representative Timish and Swanson mad at me, okay? But I need to lay out a bill because I'm about to be called over to lay out a piece of legislation in another committee.
All right. Okay. You're gonna go down. All right. The chair lays out House Bill 3565 and recognizes Chairman Smith to explain his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. HB 3565 is intended to provide more transparency in campaign contributions between the January 30th day before primary election reporting deadline and the 8th day out primary reporting deadline. This bill requires a candidate for state senator, state representative, or the State Board of Education who accepts a contribution that exceeds $10,000 from an individual to file a report by fax, hand, or email by the end of the business day. Likewise, this bill requires a candidate for statewide office who accepts a contribution that exceeds $25,000 from an individual to file a report by fax, hand, or email by the end of business day. So what you got is state rep, state senator, state board, 10,000 or more, statewide, 25,000 or more. This change in how candidates report contributions will create a more transparent system leading up to the March primaries. It is important for the public to have more timely information as to whom is donating large amounts of money to individual campaigns. Thank you for your consideration of HB 3565, Mr. Chairman. I believe there may be some testimony, but maybe not, but I'd be glad to answer.
Members, any questions? Yes, Representative Swanson.
Thank you. And Chairman Smith, can you just kind of quickly give us a little rundown of what is the law now compared to what you want to change it to?
So in the way I understand it, in connection with the primary situation, once you get past January 1st, there's not a reporting mechanism until you get to about the 9th day before the primary. So what we have going on right now, and I've experienced this, I know many of us have, is significant amounts of money that are being poured into these campaigns after the first of the year because the donors know that the voters won't have an opportunity to really find out who's making all these donations because the first reporting doesn't have to be done until just right before the election.
Okay, now don't we have a 30-day out?
So if you get me
Report.
line on that, I think that there is a 30-day line out, and especially in the general election scenario.
So this would just, okay, then the entire time from January 1st, if you got 10,000 or more, you would immediately do a report. And I would assume if somebody handed it to you at 10 p.m., you have till the end of the next business day. Is that the way it would work?
I think that's a good question. Just one second. Let me take a look. Required not later than 5 p.m. of the first business day after the date the contribution is accepted. So,
Okay, perfect.
Next business day.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Hearing none, don't go too far. We'll see, there are nobody registered to testify. Is there anyone who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3565? Yes, in the back. You may have registered an opinion, and I'm sure we can get it checked over.
He is registered, he's just not registered to testify, so I can change that in here.
Okay.
Yeah, so we don't need a reread.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second.
Hold on 1 second. All right, are you ready? All right, just to confirm, you are Robert Green with the Travis County Republican Party Election Integrity Committee for legislation, and you are against the bill, is that correct?
I'm testifying on.
All right, hold on 1 second. We'll do this one more time. All right.
Someone brought me.
1 second, sir, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just to confirm, you're Robert Green with the Travis County Republican Party Election Integrity Committee for legislation, and you are neutral on the bill, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Please proceed, thank you.
Thank you. Under current law, that has existed at least since the early 1990s. Candidates file ethics reports twice a year and at 30 and 8 days prior to the elections. Contributions filed in the last 8 days are reported in a telegram report due the next day. The system seems to work. The public has a reasonable idea who funds these candidates with a significant but not overwhelming burden on the candidates. HB 3565 would require a telegram reports any time a contribution greater than $10,000 is received, $25,000 for statewide offices in an election year. Here's what's going on. The House establishment Republican members can't really defend their voting record in a primary, so they tend to vilify the donors to their challengers, especially if they have ties to the former Empower Texas.
Mr. Green, I just want to make sure we're staying on the bill.
Yes. This reporting would make it easier and more constant. Additionally, requiring dozens of reports creates a gotcha environment and increases the accounting burden of primary challengers. And that's exactly what this bill is designed to do, discourage primary challenges. HB 3565 is a solution in search for a problem. Under current law, we know exactly who donated to whom, and we know it in time to discuss it during the campaign.
Members, any questions? Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3565? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Chairman Smith to close on House Bill 3565.
Members, I appreciate y'all's time, your patience. I'm going to go back, touch base with some folks on the law, make sure we don't have anything that conflicts with the timelines. I think you understand what I'm trying to get at here, and I think we're going to have a nice workable bill. If there's any changes to it, I'll be sure to make it. I'll come to you, Representative Swanson, or whoever else, and work on this. And I just appreciate the opportunity, and I close.
Members, any questions? Thank you, Chairman Smith. If there is no objection, House Bill 3565 will be left pending. Is there objection? Hearing none, the chair hears none, and House Bill 3565 is left pending.
I think I can hang in here just a little longer. The chair lays out House Bill 2133 and recognizes Representative Timish to explain the bill. My understanding is there's a substitute. Representative Ayala offers a committee substitute. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Chairman Smith and Vice Chair Busey, and members of the Elections Committee for giving me this opportunity to lay out House Bill 2133, as well as the committee substitute, which allows a municipality to change the date that they hold their general election for officers from the November uniform election date to the May uniform election date. Please note that this bill is limited to a municipality with a population of more than 30,000, with State Highway 121 running through it, that is wholly located within a county with a population of more than 500,000, that borders two counties with populations of more than 2 million each. In 2011, the 82nd legislature passed several bills that offered administrative support to municipalities who wanted to make adjustments to their election dates without going through the extensive process of amending their city charter. One of these administrative changes passed in the 82nd was a bill amending Section 41.0052 of Title IV, Chapter 41 of the Election Code. This allowed any city who held the date on a date other than November to move their date to the date passage of a resolution. In November of 2012, a municipality in my district availed of this opportunity and passed a resolution to move their election dates, holding their first election on the new date in November of 2014. In the 10 years since, this municipality has experienced consistent constituent complaints regarding the November election date and have witnessed firsthand voter confusion between partisan and nonpartisan elections appearing on the same ballot. And I can attest to this because I constantly get questioned about why they're on the November ballot. Another unforeseen consequence that was complicated by the pandemic and the city staff trying to administer and support nonpartisan elections added on to the partisan November election process created human resource challenges during a time when local governments are already shorthanded. And it is significantly more expensive for a city to share their required portion of the cost of a November election, since those elections are happening countywide and are more costly for the county elections administrator. The city's portion of that much larger election is more expensive than when the municipality shares the expense of the May election equally with the local school district. For almost a decade, this municipality has made a genuine effort to make the switch to November elections work. Now they would like the opportunity to move their elections back to the May uniform election date, as many of their residents have requested, even at the expense of the city council and mayor shortening their terms by 6 months. The change to Section 41.0052 in the 82nd legislature prevents any municipality from even making this change via their own charter amendment process. So only an amendment from the 88th legislature will return the city's option to utilize the May date. Vice Chair and members, thank you again for letting me lay this out. Again, this is applies to a population of a city more than 30,000 with a State Highway 121 running through it. I'm happy to answer any questions you have regarding this bill. And if there are none, I reserve the right to close. Yes, ma'am.
Members, any questions? Representative Swanson?
Thank you. First of all, I have to give you accolades for your creativity in your bracket. And I may have missed it, but who does this actually apply to?
The city of the Colony.
What's the city again?
The Colony?
The Colony, is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, of course, there was a big reason why we tried to push and get people to hold their elections in higher turnout elections at the same time. And I do understand the confusions and stuff. What is to keep you from getting this bill to the floor and it gets 1 million amendments and everybody adds their city and county to your bill and we undo everything we've done in the past?
You know, I don't feel like that would happen because actually we have city council members and mayors that are actually going to be shortening their term. And so I think that if somebody wants to do that, I think their state rep would already know because there has to be a law change to that. And so this is not me wanting to do this. This is a specific city that wants to do it. And I can just tell you, I'm at chamber luncheons. I'm, out in the community at parks. This constituents are consistently bubbling this up to me and just talking about it. I don't know that I hear this in other areas.
I would say that there are probably a lot of people on these city councils or boards and all that would love to go back to having very low turnout and only their friends show up.
It's not the. I'm sorry.
So I'm just concerned that the bill gets to the floor and there will be hundreds of amendments because everybody will want to change their little whatever. Some people. I'm worried about the bill getting out of control and taking us back to undoing this and having everything hidden in unknown elections. And so that's my big concern about the bill.
And I appreciate that concern, Representative Swanson. It's actually, let me clarify, the mayor and the city council brought this to me. It's the constituent, it's residents of the Colony that consistently over and over talk about me asking, how can this happen? How can this, it's just too difficult. We want to be able to vote for our city, and it's a nonpartisan race, and I have nonpartisan constituents, regardless of party or no party, that want this moved in their city back to May. And so, I think this is a unique situation where the residents want to be able to vote for their local city council races in May.
Okay, well, thank you. I guess that my concern is just that
it's not the elected officials, it's the actual voters.
I understand, but there would be constituents everywhere that would say this. So I have concerns that your careful bracket will just get blown up on the floor. So I'll talk to other people and you and I can talk, but I do appreciate you bringing the bill.
And I would welcome that, and I would
Okay.
definitely not want to open this Pandora's box up just specifically to this.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Members, any other questions? Hearing none, we will reserve your right to close.
Thank you, sir.
The chair calls Richard Boyer. Let me start to confirm. You are Richard Boyer with the City of the Colony, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor, please proceed.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak on 2133 to you. My name is Richard Boyer. I'm the mayor of the City of the Colony, and we've had many conversations with Representative Timish over the last several months regarding this bill. I'd like to thank Representative Timish for laying out the details of what we're asking for here. And I am here representing my constituents. I was part of the city council back in 2012 that
took advantage of the window in the legislation to move our elections to November. And at the time, that was a good faith effort. We actually thought many cities were going to do this, and it turns out very few actually did this. It sounded great in theory and it looked great on paper, but the practical application of this just simply has not worked in our community. There is voter confusion, voter frustration. We're part of a school district that has many cities, and now that those elections have always been in May and ours are gone, a lot of people feel like their voice doesn't get heard as much because there's even a lower turnout for the school board elections. That's one of the complaints. There's the partisan complaints. We even went to our county elections folks with the concerns about the partisan and nonpartisan mixing on that. And at that time, we were told, no problem, we're going to put the nonpartisan elections at the top of the ballot, and then we'll get to the partisan. So that sounded a little weird to us, but they assured us they could do that. Then we passed the resolution and moved the elections, and then the first time they create a ballot, they come back to us and say, sorry, you're going to be at the very bottom of the ballot. And what happens is voters get into the ballot positioning. If they're not completely familiar, they vote with however they voted with the rest of the ballot based on that party. And so we've seen that in the elections. We've had 6 elections since we moved our elections to November. And in the ones where they are shared with the national and state elections, we hear it over and over. They assume partisanship on a nonpartisan election based on ballot position. And as much as we've tried to educate voters on that we're at the very bottom of the ballot, however, it's a nonpartisan race, that message doesn't go through. And once I was elected mayor in November of 2021, and during that process, I had numerous folks saying, well, can you undo that? So I looked into what needed to happen to undo that, and it does take authorizing legislation. There's no way we can go back and do that ourselves. Our council is willing to cut 6 months off of their term, and to please the constituents, we made a good faith effort on this, and for my community, it just isn't working. So I appreciate the time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? I just want to ask about, just real quick, the council, did y'all pass like a resolution or take a vote on wanting to do this? Was it a consensus?
We did. The enabling legislation in 2012 gave us until the end of that year. So in November of 2012, it allowed you to take advantage of the window of a bill that had passed.
Sure. I guess I mean this time in support of the change now. Because you talked about sacrificing the 6 months, just wondering what's up.
Absolutely. We did not take a vote. It was just in discussions with Representative Timish on that.
Okay.
It would not take, it would just take us putting it on an agenda and we'd get unanimous support on this. I have full support of the council to speak on this bill.
Any other questions, members? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Next up, let's see, the chair calls Ed Johnson. Get you in the system. You are Ed Johnson. You are here representing yourself, and you are against the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Please proceed.
I wanted to thank Representative Timish for modifying the bill from where it was originally written. It's now just a city. I kind of checked the geographics of all that. Very, very clever drafting. You did a great job. But I'm still, I guess, technically against the bill. For the last 3 sessions, we've worked toward moving elections out of May to November. Statistically, May elections are about a 2% turnout for the voters. November elections, when a school or a city has moved to November, their turnout, voters voting in that election increases to about 30%. It's a huge difference. This last pandemic was actually a windfall for voters to participate in their elections because we canceled May election in 2020, and it was moved to the November. May was moved to November because of the pandemic. The little city of Giddings that I spent a lot of time in, it was a 45% turnout in the city election. It was a mayor's election. The mayor in our little city actually resigned right after that year, and the next year they had a new mayor's election. And we only had City of Giddings went from almost 4,000 people voting in the city election to 150 people voting in the city mayor's election when it got moved back to May. So it's quite a downturn to go from a May Saturday election to the Tuesday November election, which has a lot higher turnout. Being in on a Tuesday gives voters the opportunity to vote in the election, or gives them their awareness because they're more aware that that election is going on as opposed to the Saturday election. So I would strongly encourage, in this little city, I forgot the name of it, but that they encourage their school district to move to November. I mean, if the voters are confused about schools being on one election cycle and the other, let's encourage the schools to move to November.
That's not, thank you. Next up, Alan Vera. You are Alan Vera with the Harris County Republican Party Ballot Security Committee, and you are against the bill. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr.
Please
Chairman.
proceed. Thank you.
In large counties, May elections can be a real mess. Because the economies of scale of November aren't present, many political subdivisions choose to run their own elections instead of having the county run it for them. That means that county voters have to go to 3 or even 4 different places to vote in May. They have to go once for the elections being run by the county. They have to go to a different place to vote in the ISD election, a third place to vote for the Emergency Services District, and so on. It really is a burden on the voters. On the November uniform election date, the economies of scale are such that it makes much more economic sense for political subdivisions to contract with the county to run their elections. In November, voters usually only have to go one place to vote in all the races in which they're entitled to vote. We urge the committee to consider the voters and to defeat HB 2133. Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you, Mr. Vera. Next up, the chair calls Christina Atkins. You are Christina Atkins with the Texas Secretary of State. You are neutral on the bill and here as a resource witness. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Members, any questions? Thank you for being here. All right. Yes. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 2133? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Representative Timish to close on House Bill 2133.
Thank you so much for allowing me to lay out this bill. I did want to just answer for this political subdivision. All of the elections are actually in one place, and so school board and city are all in one location, one ballot. If it was moved to May, there would be no difference for the elections. And for the school district, that school district encompasses 127 square miles and 14 other political subdivisions. So making a switch for those would be impossible because of the other municipalities that are involved. But again, I appreciate the opportunity to lay this out, and I respectfully request that this be considered for local and consent calendar. Thank you for hearing me.
Members, any questions? Thank you, Representative Timish. The committee substitute is withdrawn. If there is no objection, House Bill 2133 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and House Bill 2133 is left pending.
Thank you.
The chair lays out House Bill 3372 and recognizes Representative Timish to explain the bill. Representative De Ayala offers a committee substitute.
All right, thank you so much, Vice Chair Busey and members of the Election Committee for giving me the opportunity to lay out House Bill 3372. This bill is very nuanced, and so I would like to just go through the steps, if you'll be patient with me to help me understand, because I think this will make it easier and streamline things for everyone. We have the committee substitute, which helps to both clarify and simplify the campaign finance reporting process in cases where contributions made by a credit card incur a processing fee. This is something that I got to painfully experience when I had to file multiple campaign finance reports, as do most people in this room. The campaign finance report can be difficult and confusing for candidates who don't have access to someone with legal expertise in campaign finance and election laws. And those experts are few and far between, and there are not a lot of attorneys here in Texas who specialize in this. Nowhere is this more apparent than when trying to figure out how to correctly report the transaction of the processing fee incurred when a campaign donation is made by a credit card. And there's going to be two different examples. The proper correct procedure for reporting a processing fee differs depending on how the donor and the credit card company choose to handle it. The first scenario we hope to address is when a credit card company simply deducts the processing fee from the original contribution at the time of the transaction. For instance, when a donor donates $40 to a campaign by a credit card, the processing company usually deducts a processing fee, for example, we're going to say $2, immediately so that the candidate only receives $38. Although the proper processing for reporting this is not currently spelled out clearly in the election code, in 2013, the Texas Ethics Commission issued an advisory opinion stating that in cases like this scenario, the full amount the donor intended to donate should be reported as a political contribution, and the deducted processing fee should be reported so that $2 is now reported separately as a political expenditure. In my example, the candidate would report the full $40 on their finance report Schedule A1 as a monetary contribution, and the $2 would be reported on Schedule F1 as an expenditure. House Bill 3372 would help to clarify this process for candidates by explicitly codifying the Texas Ethics Opinion into statute. The second scenario we hope to address with the committee substitute is closely related. Sometimes the credit card process offers the option to donate or defray the processing fee, allowing the donor to round up their donation, a small amount added to the donation, and the candidate receives the full amount. For the example, the donor would donate $40 and then pay an additional $2 to cover the processing fee. The election code does not address this scenario, nor has the Texas Ethics Commission had occasion to advise an opinion on it. At present, in order to correctly report this scenario, a candidate should report the $40 he or she received as the political contribution, but now also needs to report the $2 as a separate in-kind political contribution on Schedule A2. Hopefully you're following me. So in addition to the uncertainty for thousands of candidates across the state on how to correctly report these fees, a candidate would receive many donations, which I received dozens and didn't realize that my credit card company during the middle of the campaign switched from allowing that $2 to be reduced. They kindly said, well, we can have you donate the $2 covering the fee. So in the middle of a campaign, we had to switch. And this is for every single donation. So House Bill 3372 and its committee substitute helps to clarify this process by making the correct processes for both scenarios explicit in the Elections Code. In addition, it seeks to simplify the reporting process by allowing candidates to aggregate all of such in-kind donations covering the credit card processing fees, regardless of how it was done, into one single reported contribution, which covers the duration of the applicable reporting period. Chairman Busey, thank you for letting me, Vice Chair, lay this out. If there aren't any questions. I reserve the right to close.
I appreciate the title bump. No, it was very thorough. Members, any questions?
Yeah, if you
Hearing-
filled out these campaign finance reports and you have to do all these as separate transactions, it's, yeah.
Sure. I hear you. Well, we will reserve your right to close. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
We will proceed to testimony. The chair calls Valerie DeBille, who will pass on testifying. So you're Valerie DeBille, representing yourself, and we will show you as not testifying. All right. Was that, all right. Where am I at? Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 3372? Seeing none, the chair will recognize Representative Timish to close on the bill.
Thank you for allowing me to lay this out. I close.
Members, any final questions? Yes, Representative Ayala.
It's under your thing. You gotta feel for it.
There we go.
Well, I just a comment more than a question, but listening to your predecessor, Representative D'Orazio, present his bill, and you present these two bills, it just goes to show what you're hearing around the Capitol, that this freshman class is just truly exceptional. I just want to make sure that that's
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. Members, any other questions? Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Timish. The committee substitute is withdrawn. If there is no objection, House Bill 3372 will be left pending. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and House Bill 3372 is left pending. The chair lays out House Bill 246 and recognizes Representative Swanson to explain the bill.
Would you like me to go down
I think so.
there? Okay.
That's Chairman Smith's rule, though, but we'll stick by it, so. And you are recognized to explain the bill.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Busey and members. Oh, yeah, it is members. Okay. This bill is House Bill 246, relating to a pilot program for recording activity at a ballot counting station. Be it enacted by the legislature, I'm sorry, I am on the bill and not on the layout. Okay. In the second called special session in the 87th legislature, the Texas House passed Senate Bill 1, which codified many long overdue corrections and reforms to Texas election code. Among the new requirements was the addition of video surveillance and live stream requirements for all areas containing already counted ballots. Keep in mind, this does not apply to places where people are actually voting. This is about central count and other places. Unfortunately, despite such positive reforms to make the security of ballots more transparent, many of the current live stream requirements are only bracketed to counties with a population greater than 100,000, leaving many smaller counties with little accessibility or surveillance during election contests. At the same time, in large counties like Harris, where cameras are required under law, the reliability and quality of the video feed can often vary. Sometimes the cameras are placed at a poor angle or at a far distance, making it near impossible for someone viewing the video feed to clearly see the interactions between the election workers and counted ballots. This creates significant problems because under Senate Bill 1, there's a mandatory requirement for a paper trail in every election and new procedures that must occur at the central count. Without the effective implementation of a video system where a viewer can see every step of this process, it can be much harder to determine if an election worker was following the law or breaking it. One of the benefits of the video recording system implemented last session is that it creates a non-biased record of what did or did not occur in ballot counting rooms and central counting stations. The requirements ensure that all actions taken by parties involved in an election are above board, beyond a shadow of a doubt. To further this intent, the Secretary of State must develop standardized best practices for video recording and streamlining ballot counting regardless of if it's planning, camera location, and best equipment. House Bill 246 authorizes a pilot program wherein the Secretary of State will select 6 participating counties of varying populations, 2 with a population less than 500,000, 2 with a population between 50,000 and 100,000, and 2 with a population less than 5,000, and require them to use a video recording device to record ballot counting in at least 20% of precincts. In discussions with stakeholders, my office is preparing a committee substitute for this legislation that will include a clarifying provision requiring counties all accepting mail-in ballots, cured ballots, and provisional ballots that occur after election night, as well as further clarify the intended county population segments to ensure that a diverse mix of counties are sampled for the program. The committee substitute will also clarify that this legislation is not attempting to place cameras in every polling location where machines are counting ballots. The scope of the pilot program would extend to areas already covered under 87-2, Senate Bill 1's video requirements. The pilot program will operate for the next biennium until January 31, 2025, when the Secretary of State's office will submit a report to the legislature that lists which counties participated, how many precincts used recorded video, best practices for placement and video recording devices, and best angles for distance, visibility, and clarity. House Bill 246 will allow the state to have optimal data and field-tested best practices for video surveillance in rural, suburban, and urban counties to work towards expanding the parts of the video surveillance requirement that is successful while trimming out wasted resources on inefficiencies in the process. The legislation also does not have a fiscal note. However, in the event that unforeseen costs arise, my office has filed a contingency rider to ensure that the Secretary of State has the flexibility to implement the program effectively. At the program's conclusion, the legislature will have the necessary tools for standardizing this important requirement in code to ensure counties have clear expectations on video recording going forward and citizens have easy access to the most crucial aspect of their government. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and committee members. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have and respectfully request time to close.
Any questions? We will reserve your right to close. The chair calls Robert Green. Yeah. It's hard to see. All right. Just to confirm, you are Robert Green with the Travis County Republican Party Election Integrity Committee for Legislation, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, I am.
Please proceed.
My testimony is going to be very short. I support it. We have this type of procedure here in Travis County. It provides for transparency, and it provides, I think, down the road for accuracy of our elections. So I'm definitely in favor for it, and our party is in favor for it.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, the chair calls Heather Hawthorne.
There you go. Thank you. Good afternoon.
You are Heather Hawthorne, County and District Clerks Association of Texas and Self, representing the County and District Clerks Association of Texas and Self, and you are neutral on the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman and members. Representative Swanson, of course, the county clerks are all about transparency. We do have some concerns that we'd be more than happy to help. We know this is a pilot program, but we feel like there was a reason for in last session on the video recording, having those brackets of population, and it was mainly because of cost. And I just want to note that there are broadband issues all over Texas, and so those county clerks that I represent that live in very rural areas of the state have major concerns about broadband issues, being able to record those things. And also, I think we've said it a few times that not all polling places are created equally. And so a lot of these polling locations are not owned by the counties. So doing it for 20% of your polling locations, you may have to use schools or you use libraries or whatever, and the county doesn't own that. So we would have to equip those polling locations with video surveillance to be able to make this work. So we're kind of, we understand transparency. We just want to make sure that it's cost effective and efficient, especially for small counties. My good friend in Wheeler County said that the local plumber or electrician is 45 minutes away. So, you know, that's not real easy to implement, and felt like they couldn't comply with some of these things if it was put down on the smaller counties.
Members, any questions? Representative Swanson?
Yes, I just wanted to thank you for that, and if you could get with my office, and this is my legislative director right here, and see whether we fixed issues you have with the committee sub, but also give us any input you have. And we also are expecting the Secretary of State to do this, but so we have to figure out if you don't even have broadband, like, can you just work with us on that and make sure that you're happy with it?
We'll make anything work.
Okay,
so.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next up, the chair calls Adam Haynes. To confirm, you are Adam Haynes, representing the Conference of Urban Counties, and you are neutral on the bill. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. Adam Haynes, Conference of Urban Counties. Always good to testify in front of a RU, fellow RU. And Mr. Chairman, before I want to commend Ms. Swanson and Santiago, her staff. They have had an open door. They have worked with us. They've actually identified two things that we identified as a problem. They are working on the committee sub, and we appreciate Representative Swanson. We appreciate her staff. Our concerns on the bill, we were going to testify no, but because they've had such an open door, we'd rather be part of the solution than we are the problem. With that, the concerns we had were, I think it was probably a drafting error. Then it said in 20% of the precincts. I think we could just say from 20% of the precincts, because obviously the goal of this is to see what happens at central counts. And I think they're open to that. Santiago, Representative Swanson's staff is working on that very issue. So that's one of the things we're focused on. And then the other was that since this is the larger counties are already having to do this, is it better to look at more of the smaller counties? I don't think they're open to that. And so our alternative would be then let's just take the existing equipment that's in the largest, because we've already got some of this equipment, and then just review the video or apply our own video equipment to the survey and cut the cost to the Secretary of State's office, because they wouldn't have to come and put their equipment out. And so we can work on that and then use that existing feed to determine what the best practices are. And then the final one is the program runs until into the legislative session in 2025. We would suggest that it stop a little bit earlier. I know you want to get full data from the last election, which would be, I think, November the 11th of 24. But if you go into, and it ends now January 31st of '25, Ledge Council can move mountains, but that may be a little tight to get something to do. So we would suggest maybe the end of December or something like that. But very minor, and she's been great to work with. That I can answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Thanks, sir. The chair calls Alan Vera. To confirm, you are Alan Vera, here testifying on behalf of the Harris County Republican Party Ballot Security Committee, and you are for the bill. Is that correct?
Oh, that's correct.
Please proceed.
Passed last session, Senate Bill 1 set up for the first time live stream of ballot handling activities in certain size counties. But it didn't specify that the cameras must be close enough for viewers to be able to see the detailed activity. Of course, that leads to all kinds of questions and accusations from citizens watching the live stream and not understanding why they couldn't see specific actions being taken. In Dallas County, for example, the argument about whether or not the ES&S contractor actually counting the ballots did or did not take thumb drives out of his briefcase and insert them in a telecomputer could not be settled by the video. That's the quality problem they face. This bill simply creates a pilot program to determine if closer video scrutiny of the vote and ballot handling process can be provided to interested voters, candidates, and parties, and to test whether such close-up video can help settle debates and accusations raised over processes observed. We've already crossed the bridge to live stream. This bill simply proposes a test of whether we can make the live stream more meaningful and helpful to all voters and candidates across the state. We urge the committee to report HB 246 favorably to the full House. Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thanks, sir. The chair calls Christina Adkins. To confirm, you are Christina Adkins. You are representing the Texas Secretary of State, and you are neutral on the bill. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Just want to ask you a few questions. In larger counties, what are the ballot counting activities done at the precinct level? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So in our larger counties where they're using precinct scanners, so the scanners in the location where the voters are depositing their ballots in the scanner, that's essentially counting the ballot as the voter deposits it in the scanner itself. It's performing a tabulation, making a tick mark, so to speak. And so we would consider that a counting activity. Though I will say I had reached out to Representative Swanson's office to make sure I understood the intent of the bill, and it sounds to me that that's not what they were looking at. They're looking more at the central counting station and those activities there. So I think that's what my understanding is. They're working on addressing it to clarify that.
Let me ask, does this at all refer to a voter placing their marked ballot in a scanner?
As written? Is that what we're referring to?
Sure.
I don't know that it refers to it directly in that sense. It's not. I don't read it as saying it's wanting you to record the voter putting it in a ballot. But the language talking about being in precincts is what implies that it's at a polling place.
But you think what the committee said that
Yes, sir,
be
I do.
relevant?
I do.
Okay. Another question. Could there be any voter intimidation or cybersecurity concerns here as drafted? Or if you'd speak as drafted, then maybe as contemplated in the committee said?
If we're not talking about recording activities in the locations, we're just talking about recording activities at like the central counting station, or in some situations it might be a ballot board that's performing counting activities, then I wouldn't see room for voter intimidation to be an issue, because these are ballots that have already been cast or deposited in a ballot box. So it's not interacting with the voter in the moment that they're casting that ballot or depositing it or putting it in the mail. So I don't really see that being an issue. As far as cybersecurity concerns, I will say that's probably something that we would address in a report, because what we were told anecdotally from counties, and if I can probably go back and look at some specific counties that address some of these issues, but within hours of them putting their live streaming on, putting it on their website, they were getting a lot of traffic, and some traffic that could be perceived as like an attempted cyber attack because of the live stream that was there. And so luckily our counties are pretty well versed on cybersecurity. This is something we've been educating counties on since 2016. A lot of very, very active involvement in this area. So I don't believe this has been a problem for counties, but they did see an uptick in traffic to their websites that was concerning.
Thanks so much. Members, any other questions? Representative Ayala.
A couple. What I heard in the bill and from some of the witnesses was the quality of the video currently. And I'm trying to remember where the cameras were in Harris County, my county. But is there any requirement in current law as to the quality of the camera or the resolution requirements or anything like that that deal with the camera quality when we?
No, sir, not currently in the law. There's nothing that defines it on that level. And I think, while we have seen some variations from county to county on how they implemented this, some people used, or some counties use very, sophisticated surveillance cameras. There were a number of counties for cost reasons used things like Ring cameras to help meet those requirements. We haven't had a lot of complaints in our office about the quality of the video footage. We have had folks express concerns about placement of cameras. I will say that is something that I have heard about. And, it's hard to prescribe very specific standards on how to place a camera because the space varies so much from county to county. But if I had to say that there was one issue that I heard about, it would be that issue on like the placement of cameras in these locations.
And this is just a little bit of ignorance on my part, but is there, when you live stream something, there's always an ability to record, but is there a separate requirement in the current law to record that footage?
Yes, sir, I believe there is, and they have to make the recording available for a specific period of time. It's considered public information.
Okay.
Let me ask you one more question. Just as you've looked at the bill and you're exploring how this study is going to be most effective to provide information moving forward, do we have the right brackets in your opinion? Size, do you have any feedback on that? Are we approaching that of getting a good kind of overlay of the state of the areas that are already not required?
That's a great question. And so I did have my folks look at this, or one of my folks took it upon themselves to look at this and figure out what counties we were talking about here. So the brackets that are in here, we've got about 50 counties that are under 5,000 in population. It's a pretty big number. And so I think looking at some of those smaller counties and the challenges they might face from a resource perspective, a broadband perspective, whatever those issues are, a smaller county, that is a really good place to look. I will say it looks like there is a bracket in here that we're kind of missing because we go from 500,000 and above to between 50,000 and 100,000. And so the great majority of our counties fall in that bracket right there. And so, that right now, the provisions in Senate Bill 1 that related to the recording of central counting stations, it was specific to counties 100,000 and over in population. So making sure we're including some of those folks that are under 100,000 would probably, but not quite, between that 50 and 100,000, that mark would be important to include those. We'll get some of those, but we may not get all of them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Representative Swanson.
I just wanted to confirm, I think these brackets you have worked with my office on, and
Yes,
you
ma'am.
specifically made sure that we knew about the problems. And so if we can we'll make sure that you're happy
Absolutely.
with whatever the brackets come up with.
Yes, ma'am, and I did speak to your office yesterday, and they were very informative and said that these are, when we talked about the bill itself to make sure I understood the intent of what we were trying to do here, they did tell me that there were a couple of different things they were looking at, and brackets was one of the issues. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Members, any further questions? Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 246? Yes, in the back. Come on up.
Kia, can you re-register him? He's not on this one. It's not showing you, so if you don't mind re-registering. I can add you as testifying. Okay, there you go. You're in there, just not testifying.
Okay.
We haven't recognized him yet, so.
Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson.
Yes,
You are Ed Johnson. You're testifying on behalf of yourself, and you're for the bill. Is that correct?
that is correct.
Go ahead.
Okay. Just to go back to what this could end up helping the public get the confidence back in the election system. In it was about 2002, Harris County went full to electronic voting. And there was a lot of optimism or people worrying about, even back then, if these electronic machines were being hacked, if somebody was cheating. Travis County went about the same time. You heard testimony from Travis County. What Harris County and Travis County decided to do, and it was Republican run at the time and a Democrat, Travis County, we actually had the ballot board come into the warehouse and pull out 10 voting machines, and we set them up that were eligible to use in that election, turned them on, and purchased video cameras that were on each one of the screens, and had all the people in the warehouse and the ballot board all day long on election day go by and cast votes every time they walked by one of these machines. Then they took the videotapes and turned them over to a accounting firm, and the accounting firm played the tape back and recorded each vote that was cast in the video to see that it came out to the same count that the machine actually recorded. So, and that ended the whole controversy of, do the electronic machines work or not? Because there was videotape proving that they did, and all that controversy just kind of disappeared in the two counties on that particular system. That's what this video equipment in these places would actually help us do, help us increase the confidence of the voter so that they're more assured about their vote being counted correctly and that the election is being run right. I would hope you would be able to pass this. We need to work out the details, get the groupings and the size and everything, make sure the cameras can see what it is that they're doing. And I had one last comment that I forgot.
Oh, go right ahead.
Yes. Did you know that Representative Swanson is a great American?
I think I've heard your testimony on that in the past, and it's certainly borne out. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? All right, thank you so much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on, for, or against House Bill 246? If not, the chair recognizes Representative Swanson to close.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and members. House Bill 246 will equip the legislature with the necessary information to standardize ballot counting in an effective way that best supports our counties and citizens. I did want to say that in this program, where the large counties are now already required to have video cameras, those cameras can always be used in the Secretary of State's study, this pilot program. They're going to be learning what should be the top procedure. Are these cameras good enough quality? Where are they being put? All of that stuff. So we're not just saying, run out and randomly buy new equipment. We're saying we want to figure out what works and what doesn't. So I would respectfully request a favorable consideration from the committee. And again, we're working on a committee sub with all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Members, any questions? Thank you so much. If there's no objection, House Bill 246 will be left pending. I don't hear one, so House Bill 246 is left pending. And members, that concludes today's agenda. If there's any other business, I hear none. The Election Committee stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.